You're listening to Stealing from Wizards, Volume 3, Kidnapping, by R.A. Consul.
Chapter 19. Seashells. The first day back to school was agony. It had all the usual miseries of too much work and too little time, with the added pain of the gaping hole left by Marie. An early morning stroke of genius from Arthur had made things vastly worse. He'd thought to send her a letter. She'd be at the Blandlands Reentry Training Center for a few months, so they could still exchange mail even if they couldn't see each other. It was utterly brilliant and terribly timed. They'd sent the letter with the Luton Post at breakfast, and then had to wait through an entire school day to see if she'd written back. It dragged out every moment in class to an eternity. In alchemy, the combined effect of anticipating mail while watching for a pot to boil appeared to bring time to a complete halt, and may have even caused it to reverse. Spellcraft at the end of the day provided some small mercy, as they didn't have to pretend to pay attention. So long as they weren't actively destroying something or injuring themselves, Mr. Pendragon let them be. Not that he wasn't aware that they were slacking off. He was just too busy keeping anyone from being dismembered to worry about the idlers. It was their problem if they failed. It was his if they died. That allowed Charlie to lounge in her enormous wooden mortar and distract herself by distracting her friends. "Do you think she'll like it there?" she asked. "Probably not," answered Arthur, shifting to look uncomfortably like Marie as he thought of her. "Dad says they really try to convince fireflies to stay. I think they will make all the Blandland stuff seem really boring." "Blandland stuff is boring," Charlie said, agreeing with the wisdom of wizards trying to keep her. "So she'll probably come back then." Kuro made a small noise of doubt, which Charlie demanded he explain. "It will probably just make her more set on leaving if she figures out what they're doing," he said. "She's kinda stubborn like that." Charlie grumbled about how annoying Kuro was when he was right. He couldn't disagree. The final bell of the day promised a release from their impatience. Charlie was out the door before it had finished chiming. Arthur and Kuro were slower as they were left to put away her tools and carry the backpack she'd forgotten. That delay compounded for Kuro as Mr. Pendragon caught him at the door. "Could you hang on for a minute?" he asked, flashing a charming grin at the friend he was stealing him from. Kuro groaned but relented. "Go on ahead," he said to Arthur. "I'll catch up if I can. Tell Charlie she doesn't have to wait for me." "I'm sorry to keep you," apologized Mr. Pendragon, "but I do think this has the potential for being urgent. You see, I was reading over your runework transcriptions for the bracelet over the holiday, and I'm concerned about the contents. Would you mind if I had a look at the inner face?" It was nice of the teacher to ask permission, Kuro thought. He couldn't really refuse, but it was still considerate of the man to pretend. He sat and let Pendragon inspect the runework around the inside of the band, comparing it against Kuro's notes. He started by trying to find an error in the transcription, but grew worried when he couldn't. "I'm not sure how to say this, Kuro," Pendragon started, voice filled with compassion in a way that made his student fill with worry. "This bracelet is quite dangerous." "The outer runes are the ones which hold you in place," continued the teacher. "The inner ones are a completely different enchantment. I'm sorry to say that if the bracelet were to break or be removed, it could explode." Kuro waited for the teacher to deliver whatever tragically bad news he seemed to have, but nothing followed. "Is that all?" "What do you mean? I just told you that you're walking around with a bomb on your wrist. An accidental encounter with one of those," he gestured to a pair of nearby tin snips, "and you lose your hand." "That's not as bad as I expected," confirmed Kuro. "I thought it would kill me for sure." "You knew?" The teacher was aghast. "Of course." Kuro dismissed the naivete of the teacher. "Do you think they'd let me out of their sight if I didn't? What if I tried to cut it off? Somebody else might get hurt." Mr. Pendragon looked at Kuro as if for the first time. It wasn't the kind of gaze he was used to, when people regarded him as a menace or a mystery, a curiosity to probe or a problem to solve. It was a look of honest pity, one that recognized him as a damaged and frightened boy barely holding himself together. He didn't like that look. "Is that all you needed?" he asked. Pendragon shook himself free from the moment and adopted his more familiar, jovial smirk. "I had imagined that you would want it removed, so I prepared something over the break." He had Kuro's attention. "It's quite a robust enchantment," said the teacher. "It might be dangerous even with the weak magic out in the Blandlands. However, if one were to disrupt the magical field entirely, the enchantment would cease to function." He retrieved a small bucket from a drawer and set it down in front of Kuro. "Salt?" Kuro asked, inspecting the contents. "Salt," Pendragon confirmed. He made no mention of the expense and effort it would have taken to collect so much refined salt, especially on an isolated island like Avalon. If you can completely submerge the bracelet in the salt, it should disrupt the magic enough to remove it safely. Kuro reached out his hand, ready to rid himself of the offending bangle. As he approached, the wind swirled with excitement, threatening to blow away the very salt that would fully reunite the two. But Kuro's hand hesitated just above. "If the guard finds out I've taken it off, I'll probably be in real trouble," he said. "In that case, I did make one that doesn't explode." Pendragon produced a replica of the anchor. Unlike the ones his student had made, it appeared functional. The runes along it flickered and shimmered. It doesn't have all the features, but it should still work as intended. The temptation was overwhelming. To have one that he could take on and off as he wished, to run free with the wind whenever he wanted. But so was the fear of being taken away from Avalon. He'd just promised Charlie that he wouldn't leave her. He couldn't accept the risk of being discovered with a fake. Even a functional fake. "Wearing this keeps me out of prison," he said. "Thanks anyway." He climbed off the chair and headed for the door, though he stopped at the threshold, this time of his own accord. He was suddenly overcome by a question recently asked of him. "Why are you nice to me?" He watched as the teacher ran through a series of denials and excuses in his mind, mouth starting to form each while his hands gesticulated wildly. Eventually, he settled on what may have been close to the truth. "I don't mean to be. I mean, I do, but no more than to any other student. If I do pay you more attention, it may be that I..." He chewed over the next words while he decided whether to share them. "I may feel a bit responsible for you." He settled into the chair Kuro had abandoned and let out a long sigh, his strong shoulders sinking. "I might have mentioned in class that I had a mentor, but I've never said who he was. That's because he's earned a bit of a negative reputation. You see, the man who taught me the art of enchanting was Claudius Roche." To say that Roche had a bit of a negative reputation was like saying the ocean was mildly damp. He was blamed for several major thefts and multiple disappearances, including the young Luton Bindle. He'd brainwashed Vincent, the stray scientist, to pretend to be a servant at the school for years, just to find out who the summer heir was. Most famously, though, he was widely believed to be the primary instigator of the coup d'etat. Perhaps most villainously, but least well known, he had led the team who created Kuro, intending one day to use him as an assassin. "It was me who introduced Beatrice, I mean Miss Crawley, to him." That confession was labored, as though it were a lead weight he had to force up from the depths of his chest. Once free, the rest came pouring out. "You need to understand that I had no idea what he had planned. He was a great mentor to me, a brilliant enchanter and a patient teacher. Everything I try to be for my students. He never talked about trying to overthrow governments or manufacture people. It's like there was a whole other person I didn't know hiding inside him. I often wonder if there were signs which I was ignoring, villainous behaviors I excused as harmless eccentricities. If I'd just been a bit more aware, I might have prevented a tragedy. But I wasn't. I was young and blinded by his brilliance, and so the world has to live with the consequences. People dead or missing, Beatrice in jail. Me existing, Kuro added. That's not what I meant, defended Pendragon. But maybe if I'd been more aware, you wouldn't have spent half your life in the hands of a monster. Since I can't fix the past, I can try to make the future a bit better." He paused to collect himself and regain something of a teacherly quality again. "I don't mean to single you out. If I'm paying any extra attention to you, it's so you don't suffer any more than you have from my negligence. I'm sorry." It wasn't clear how to react to that kind of revelation. Part of him wanted to scream at the fool for ruining Ms. Crawley's life. Another thought of him like the neighbors of people he'd burgled, feeling guilty for not noticing the theft in progress. "Thank you" seemed like a safe response, neither accepting the apology nor blaming him for his mistakes. The teacher received it without complaint, then allowed him to leave. He ran as fast as he could to catch up with his friends, the effort helping to clear his mind and regain excitement for the mail. He had told them not to wait, but hoped they would anyway. He didn't know what Marie could possibly write in a letter that he was so eager to read. Maybe, like their visit to her, he just wanted proof that she still cared that their friendship existed after they were separated. As his legs turned to noodles and his breath ran short from the sprint across the island, he considered that they had no way of being sure she'd even be able to write back so quickly. They had just decided for her that she would have both the time and desire to pen a letter and mail it before the Luton stopped delivering for the day. Staggering through the door of Autumn Lodge, he found Charlie and Arthur speaking with Ingot. He was not a postal Luton, nor did he have a letter for them. Instead, he appeared to have been delivering bad news based on the tears flowing down Charlie's cheeks. Catching sight of Kuro, she shouted with equal parts anger and despair, "She isn't there!" Ingot was able to explain what Charlie could not. One of his friends in the postal service had attempted to deliver the letter to the Blandlands Reentry Training Center, but Marie wasn't registered there. The postal Luton had asked around and found that she hadn't returned to the Fey realm at all. Her dad had taken a new job overseas and taken the family with him. "I'm sorry," said Ingot. He fidgeted with the beads decorating his beard. "I was fond of her too." He then vanished, leaving them to their sorrow. "Did you hear that? Overseas!" Charlie cried. "Like on the other side of the ocean! We'll never see her again!" While she wailed her grief, Kuro found himself unable to make any noise at all. He just stood, unmoving, staring at the floorboards. What pulled him from his daze was the persistent stare from Arthur. It felt like he was drilling a hole into Kuro's skull with his eyes, which was all the more unusual given that the two rarely looked directly at each other. He looked up to meet the stare and found it full of uncertainty. Arthur seemed to be asking a question or seeking confirmation. Now locked in his gaze, Kuro started to think again, and in doing so, joined in the confusion. They'd just been to Marie's house less than a week before, and the family hadn't mentioned going anywhere. The children all spoke with despair about returning to their old schools. Isabel talked at length about how she expected Marie to return to Avalon. Marie herself said that she'd see them at school. Granted, Kuro wasn't sure how long it would take Blandlanders to undertake a move like that, but he expected it would take more time, not less, than for a wizard family. "And she doesn't even have her memories!" Charlie shouted, returning to anger as a means of keeping her tears under control. "She doesn't remember us at all! That's just not fair! We need to give them back to her!" Something was wrong. It didn't add up. He would have blamed it entirely on his paranoia, but Arthur felt it too. "You're right," said Kuro, and then headed to his room to prepare. Kuro's sudden departure shook Charlie from her anguish. "Am I?" she asked, tripping after Kuro. "Aren't you going to tell me I'm being ridiculous, or that it's impossible, or that it's better for her this way?" "I think that's Marie's job, and she's not here," said Kuro as they walked into his room. He started shoving necessities into his book bag. "Sorry to wake you, Autolycus. I'm going to need your help." "What are you doing? Why do you need your winter coat? Why do you even have that much rope in your room? Where are you going?" Charlie's volume grew with her suspicion. Given their relatively public location, that could cause a problem. He closed the door and, in a tone more appropriate for the plot he was conceiving, he said, "I'm going to kidnap Marie." The stunned silence provided him with time to mentally review some of the details of his plan. "Can I borrow your lockpicks?" After another contemplative pause, he added, "And your unicorn?" Not long later, Kuro, Charlie, and Arthur were dressed for winter and standing at the Avalon Ferry dock, watching the Vale, the shimmering edge of their world, wash in and out with the icy waves of the Blandlands Bay. "You still haven't explained how we're going to get across the water," complained Charlie, though she had finally consented to speak in a whisper appropriate for the secrecy of their task. "Are we going to steal that Danny lady's motorboat?" She appeared excited by the prospect of a heist, but reasonably wary of attempting crossing the bay. The waves were taller than the students and carried ice floes that could crush the little boat like it was made of paper. No. Kuro prepared himself to reveal a secret he'd kept from even his best friends for the entire year. "We're going to walk." He coaxed Autolycus out of his bag and asked him to go check if the parking lot on the far side of the bay was clear of people. Charlie started to panic as the raccoon neared the barrier between their springtime paradise and the thrashing waters of the Blandlands. "Stop before you pop, Autolycus! You can't go out there!" she called. The familiar ignored her, probably because he couldn't see what she was talking about. The border between worlds didn't exist to him, just as it didn't to Luton. He paid no mind to Charlie and Arthur trying to stop him from wandering into the waves, nor the gagging panic they expressed as he walked confident into what they imagined would be his inescapable demise. As the shimmering silky veil, carried forward by a violent swell, crashed over him, the two children braced for watching the little beast, of whom they'd grown so fond, burst into his constituent memories. Then they held themselves frozen in that tension as he simply vanished from their sight. "I should probably tell you something," said Kuro. "I'm a little bit more Luton than I let on." He felt the steady gaze of his familiar on him, their sign that it was safe to cross. "I'll be right back." Closing his eyes and focusing on that feeling, he walked towards it. He knew he'd successfully crossed when the muffled roar of the bay suddenly appeared behind him. He opened his eyes and quickly moved to hide among some shrubs. He mostly trusted the raccoon's scouting, but he was never sure how much the familiar understood. The princess was docked and rocked gently against its moorings. A quiet snow drifted gently down over the parking lot, it being subject to the seasons as normal, unlike Avalon Island. That snow provided confidence that no soul had crossed the lot in the past day, though it would reveal his passing. He would need to move quickly, and that would require help. Passing back over to Avalon was met with a combination of relief and anger. "Why didn't you explain what you were doing?" demanded Charlie. Arthur nodded along with arms crossed, letting Charlie express his frustration for him. "It works better if I don't think too much about it," said Kuro. "Could you come with me for a minute and lend me Henrietta? Even along a ferry road, it's a long walk to Bytown." Charlie was excited by the offer, though confused. "How? I'm a normal wizard. I can't do whatever you just did." Kuro patted his book bag. "You've ridden in here before. There's still space for you around Henrietta's saddle." "When did you put that in there?" Charlie said as she clambered into the bag. "While you were changing into winter clothes," answered Kuro, offering the opening to Arthur. "I left a note." That they didn't question him was either a sign of great trust, or a sign that they were too bewildered by the circumstances to argue. He hoped that if it were the former, he was worthy of it. Having friends in the bag made it much more difficult to skip over the bay. The key to a safe passage was to forget entirely that the Vale existed, and trust that he was going to step out onto solid ground, not into the raging waves. The anxiety drummed up from the possibility of falling out into the waters and condemning his friends to a slow suffocation inside his bag with no means of escape was hard to silence. So too was Charlie, who kept asking, "Are we there yet?" He felt for the eyes of Autolycus on him and ran forward blindly. Running helped. He had less time to second-guess himself and had to focus more on not falling over. It also meant that when he hit the far side and the slope changed, he fell flat on his face. Starting the adventure caked in snow wasn't a great start, but it was better than drowning. He led his friends out of the bag and Autolycus back in. The familiar, already tired of the idyllic snow-covered forest, returned to the warm, dry nest of blankets he'd fashioned for himself in the recesses of Kuro's satchel. "Could you saddle up Henrietta while I get Marie's memories?" Kuro asked as he retrieved Charlie's lockpicks from a shelf in his bag. Charlie did not comply. "Now wait 1 minute," she said. "Who are you and what have you done with Kuro?" "I don't know what you're talking about," he replied, sifting through the picks for an appropriate one for the first lock of the memory shed. "You are voluntarily going on an adventure, risking getting into a lot of trouble, stealing things, giving orders. The Kuro we knew would rather hide under his bed than any of that." She looked to Arthur for confirmation. She received it, but in a way likely to make her worry more. "That's true," he said, "unless one of us were in danger." Charlie's doubt turned to accusation. "Do you know something? You know something, don't you? If you know something and aren't telling me, then—" In the pause while she thought of an adequate consequence for his treasonous behavior, Kuro cut in. "I don't actually know anything, but I saw something when we were at our house, something I shouldn't have, and I think her not coming back might be because of it." "Can't you tell us what it is?" asked Arthur. "I don't remember seeing anything." Kuro focused on picking the several locks on the solid brick building that held the Firefly memories, which gave him time to consider how much truth to share. He trusted his friends, but a secret shared was no secret at all. If they knew what he was hiding, they wouldn't ask him to reveal it, but the suspicion would mean they'd keep guessing at it until they got it right, and that could happen in a place with more eavesdroppers. As the last tumbler clicked into place on the last lock, he made a decision. "I saw a picture of Marie as a baby," said Kuro. "She had a very royal jawline, and another one of her dad was someone that looked like Princess Edane." Charlie scoffed. "Do you think our Marie is the summer heir? That's ridiculous. She's not that good a liar. She didn't even know what the summer court was when she got here. Besides, she would have told me." "I don't think she knows," said Kuro. "If I'm right, and I'm not sure that I am, somebody went to a lot of trouble to keep her secret." "Why would they do that?" asked Charlie. "If she's actually the queen, why would they make her live like a boring Blandlander? She could be in a palace!" Arthur answered for Kuro. "To prevent kidnapping and assassination." The door to the memory bunker swung open. It was dark inside, and Arthur conjured a small orb of light to allow exploration. It was Spartan, a metal table, a few chairs, and a wall full of small square shelves, each containing a spiral seashell with an identification number inked on it. The room was almost silent, except for a soft whispering sound coming from a small cabinet to the left side, labeled Unclaimed. Kuro shimmied the latch and found half a dozen shells inside, most dusty from neglect. One, a whelk shell with a mottled pink pattern, was clean and louder than the rest. Kuro put it to his ear. He could hear the jumbled whispers of the owner's stolen thoughts, incomplete ideas about solutions to school problems, feelings about meals, plans for the weekend, all intermingled and overlapped. It was indecipherable but unmistakably Marie. Kuro placed the shell carefully in a drawer in his bag. "I'm gonna find out if Marie is okay and give her back her memories now. It might be dangerous, so if I'm not back by tomorrow..." He prepared himself to ask something he never thought he would be willing to. But if he was right, "Could you tell your dad, Arthur?" His friends moved to block his exit in unison. "We're coming with you," said Charlie. Kuro wasn't prepared for that. "Why?" "She's our friend too," said Arthur. "And you don't know how to ride Henrietta," added Charlie. "Do you?" asked Kuro. "Yeah, of course I do," she said with wavering confidence. "On the ground, anyway." The glory of riding a winged unicorn along Zephyr Way at full gallop through the freshly fallen snow was substantially lessened for Kuro by having to do it inside his own satchel. He imagined the wind whipping through both Henrietta's and Charlie's golden hair as they rode past frozen waterfalls, caves of hibernating bog sloths, and majestic canyons. His experience of it was to lose several hands of cards to Arthur in a cramped leather-bound office. "Do you really think she's the summer heir?" Arthur asked, drawing a card and then returning a rock to the top of the stack. He'd become so used to dealing with the wind surrounding Kuro that managing paperweights had become second nature. I don't know. Kuro drew a card of his own. It seems silly. We've met her whole family. I'm probably wrong. What do you think? I've always found it a little too easy to turn into her. It was less an answer to his question and more an admission that Arthur harbored the same doubts. Most people I have to try to look like on purpose. Marie, I sometimes turn into by accident. He considered his discard for a moment, continuing the game as though he hadn't just confessed to knowing Marie was the rightful heir to the throne for several years. Most changelings imprint on the first baby they encounter and copy them. Nobody knows what I looked like before Garmer found me in the heir's crib, because I changed shape and ran away. I wondered if I find it easy to look like Marie, because that was my first form. You've never said anything about this before, said Kuro, drawing yet another unhelpful card. My dad has talked a lot about how much danger the heir would be in if they were found. Arthur laid down another winning hand and started collecting cards for another round. I think he was trying to tell me not to look for them. Kuro chuckled at finding another member of Dubois' conspiracy of ignorance. He wondered how many others were working very hard to not know who the summer heir was. I used to want to know who it was very badly, Arthur continued. If we found them, that might tell me where I came from and why I was left in that crib. Also, who I'm supposed to be. Mom and Dad always told me it didn't matter, to just be myself. That's hard for a changeling. We're supposed to be someone else. Before Kuro had a chance to respond, or lose another hand of cards, Charlie's head appeared in the bag's opening. We're here! Kuro would have chosen somewhere less populated than the Bytown market to crawl out of a satchel. A collection of school-age kids and a winged unicorn drew unwelcome attention. Let's go, said Kuro, hurrying to Detritus, and put Henrietta away. He did not lead them directly to the Montreal exit. Instead, he worked his way through the labyrinth of back alleys and hidden pathways that wove around the lane, throwing off anyone who might be trailing them. Here he was in his element. The clumsy pair who followed in his wake made it harder to stay hidden, but as a child of the lane, that was a trifling challenge. Charlie managed to keep quiet for most of the skulking, but as she sensed they were approaching the end, she whispered a concern. I can't really come with you. I'll just slow you down out there. She looked around and shuddered at the crumbling buildings and litter-filled alleys with a growing fear of being left behind. I thought about that on our way here, said Kuro, exiting an alley across from a burned-out church. This is a safe place for you to stay while I go get Marie. Charlie responded with a look of utmost incredulity, for which Kuro couldn't blame her. It was scorched and roofless. The mortar on the stone walls was flaking away, and the whole thing seemed to be held up by a feat of stubbornness rather than architecture. Stepping through the gap that once held a door, they found charred pews filled with wispy ghosts, waiting for a sermon. Father John, are you here? The robed figure of the priest of the doomed congregation floated through the back wall, his head a skull wreathed in blue flames. Kuro! He screamed, a wail they could feel all the way to their bones. Welcome back! While Arthur and Charlie covered their ears and fought the urge to run screaming, Kuro greeted his old friend. Thank you. It's good to see you. I'm sorry to impose, but my friends need somewhere safe to stay for a couple of hours. Could she use my old room? Of course! The ghost screeched. Any friend of yours is a friend of ours! Kuro led Charlie into the secret chamber beneath the pulpit where he had spent his first months of freedom from Phineas. Here, take the shell. I don't know what would happen to it in the Blandlands. If we're not back with Marie before morning, go to Arthur's dad and tell him what's going on. He looked to his other partner in crime. Are you sure you want to come? Arthur gave him a steadfast and certain nod. I don't think you can kidnap Marie by yourself. Leading Arthur through the darkening alleys of Detritus, Kuro felt more at home than he had in years. There was a comfort in the quiet, an invitation from the shadows to stay and hide. He was tempted to linger, but there were matters more pressing than his own contentment. He paused across from the exit to Montreal, ensuring that it was not being watched. He let minutes pass, and while he could feel a growing impatience from his partner because of both the cold and the urgency of their task, he didn't rush. Convinced that the exit was clear, he slid through the shadows towards it, Arthur doing a remarkable job at mimicking his approach. Together, they clambered through the slushy culvert and out into the Blandlands. It was a cold and dark walk to the bus station, but the night and falling snow gave them cover from any observers who might be curious about young teens out alone. They traveled across the city on mostly empty trains, using unexpired transfer tickets scavenged from trash cans. "What if she doesn't want to come with us?" asked Arthur, as they approached their final stop. "You mean if she won't leave her house in the middle of the night with a couple people she barely remembers?" Kuro confirmed his friend's concern. "I thought we'd invite her out to a movie. I think that's a thing Blandlanders do at night." "That's a bad plan." "I know, but I don't think they'd let us on the bus with her if she was tied up." They walked up the street toward Marie's house. On the second trip, it was much easier to find. Not because they had been there before, but because there was a Blandlands police car parked in the driveway. Kuro could guess what that meant, but a tug on his sleeve helped confirm his fears. "We're too late," said Arthur, directing Kuro's attention to a poster taped to a lamppost. On it were two photos, one of Marie and another of her mother. Above them was printed the word, "Missing." From behind them, someone had approached in utter silence, but chose that moment to reveal themselves. Too late for what?
Thank you for listening to Stealing from Wizards. If you liked our show, please consider rating or reviewing on iTunes. If you want to support this podcast or just can't wait for the next chapter, the full book is available on Amazon, Kobo, and Indigo. Our theme music was written by Camille Saint-Saëns, transcribed by Franz Liszt, performed by Rebecca Verdun, and used with permission. This episode was produced by Jim Tigwell.